Carolyn's got a couple of announcements about the lingering 2020 elections moving into Georgia, and then I will introduce today's meeting and what the schedule is going to look like. So, Carolyn, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today for this our City Council endorsement meeting. And if I haven't met you yet, I'm Carolyn Lasco. I'm one of the district leaders for Grand Street Dems. And before we get started hearing from our City Council candidates, one item of business is to please make sure your full name is on your Zoom window. This is important for when we get into voting. Please make sure it's your full name. And for a side, to follow up on our email this week about Georgia, hopefully you all saw our email with Tony Alfieri's really great list of different organizations that you can get involved with, whether that's text or phone or donating or postcarding. I recommend that you go to our website if you're not sure what to do and you want to do something. This weekend, I signed up with Fair Fight Action, Stacey Abrams' organization, and I did both text and phone banking with them. And I really strongly encourage folks to join their phone banks if you feel like doing something. The text banking gets quite full because a lot of people don't like phone banking. But I know we have all done now 3 months of phone banking and you're all really good at it. And what they are doing right now for the next 2 to 3 weeks is making sure folks have requested their mail-in ballots. And it's a good phone list. I only did it for like 45 minutes yesterday and I talked to like a ton of people. Now, also good to know, Fair Fight, because of their nonprofit status, they don't advocate for a candidate or even a political party. So if you really want to be doing Ossoff and Warnock specifically, that's wonderful. And that's another thing to do. With Fair Fight, you're not even allowed to mention a candidate's name. You are just giving them information on how to vote. That's it. However, I felt like it was extremely productive because I was talking to a fair amount of elderly women who did not know they had to request another absentee ballot for this election. They thought they would automatically get mailed one. And it feels like, you know, I trust the strategy behind this organization and getting out the vote for folks who are hopefully going to vote for Democrats. So I just want to recommend doing that. And again, if the text banks are full, try to sign up for the phone banks because they do need people for the phone banks. And again, check back with the list that Tony created for us. And as a final wrap up, we had a New York for Biden wrap up call a couple of days ago where they were just saying like really everyone's participation in these phone banks was really crucial, that the margins of victory in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Georgia, the margins were so slim that like if you talked to one person and told them where their polling site was or what the deadline was or reminded them to bring an ID, it was super crucial. And so for everyone who was with us, you know, since August, I just want to say I'm extending this thank you from Rob Diamond, who was the Biden liaison to New York for Biden, and also for more Georgia actions that the New York for Biden crew can get in on. That is happening. And it's just that the Georgia folks on the ground are figuring out how we can best get involved. You know, if you want to do something today, donate money. If you don't want to, if donating money is not possible, try to do a phone bank. And if that's also not comfortable, then like we will find some way for you to get involved. We just can't descend en masse, you know, into Georgia. We want to take our lead from the folks on the ground there. So anyway, thank you all, and let's get started.
Okay, thanks so much. Let me just do a quick intro into what today is all about. We are starting to think about 2021. In 2021, New York City has a whole bunch of vital elections that are going to determine the direction of the city for the next decade. We've got mayor, comptroller, borough president in Manhattan. 2/3 of the city council have open seats. Those are cleared because an incumbent has to leave because of term limits. And with ranked choice voting in our primaries for the very first time next year, you're going to see more candidates running than ever before, kind of staying in the race to try to win those second place votes to see what happens. So there's going to be a very crowded field, a lot of very important races. One of those open seats is on city council is District 1. Right down here, covers most of lower Manhattan. And there are 6 Democratic candidates running for this open seat in 2021. And I know Election Day is not until November, but for New York City, the June primary is really the big game. And since petitioning for that primary starts in February, our endorsement process, the club endorsement process, determines which candidates will appear on the petitions we carry in our neighborhood. So that process starts now, earlier than ever before, and we've got a bunch of things coming up over the next 3 months. We're actually going to be holding 3 more big candidate forums over the next 3 months in partnership with our other Democratic clubs in Lower Manhattan. I'll be sending out emails about this, but Sunday, December 13th is going to be for Manhattan District Attorney. Sunday, January 10th is going to be for Manhattan Borough President and the New York City Comptroller. And Sunday, February 7th will be for Public Advocate and Mayor. Both of those are going to be like 2.5, 3-hour-long meetings, lots of candidates. It's going to be our chance to meet all of them and ask questions. And then Grand Street Dems is going to hold one giant endorsement meeting on Monday, February 8th to select our endorsed candidates for all of those races. But today, we're going to be hearing from candidates for Council District 1 and voting today for our endorsement for that race. So we're going to get this one out of the way early. We've got, we're going to hear today from 5 candidates who are seeking our endorsement. We're going to hear first from Gigi Lee, then Tiffany Winbush, then Jenny Lowe, then Christopher Marte, and finally Maud Marone. There's a 6th candidate, Denny Salas, who let me know this week that he is not seeking any club endorsements, and so he's actually not participating in our forum today. So let me just try to get through this quickly. Here's how today's going to work. Each candidate gets a total of 20 minutes. They can start with up to 4 minutes to introduce themselves. After that, we're going to have Q&A from all of you. If you are prepared to ask a question, please raise your hand in Zoom. How you do that is you click the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then there should be a raise hand button there in your window. That gives me a little hand, so I know you want to ask a question. You can do that even while the candidate is introducing herself so that we have questions lined up and we're ready to go. Please make sure, as Carolyn said, that your real name is in your Zoom label. Otherwise, I might not know who you are. And if you don't actually know how to change that yourself, you can add your name to the chat, and one of us who are the hosts for this meeting can change it for you. Generally, we're going to call on people in the order they raise their hands, though if there's a whole bunch of people, we are going to prioritize members of the club. I know there are a bunch of people here who might not be members. If you raise your hand quick enough, hopefully we'll get you in as well. If someone already asks your question or a version of your question, please lower your hand unless you really truly have a specific angle you need to address. But we've got a bunch of topics and we're going to try to hit as many things as possible. Please limit your question to 30 seconds. And candidates will have to limit their answers to 2 minutes. I know that's not really sufficient, but we have limited time and we're trying to address as many different issues as possible. If we run out of time in those 20 minutes, you may also add your questions to the chat in Zoom, and candidates are welcome to respond in the chat after their time is up. About that chat, please keep this civil. We will not tolerate bullying or personal insult.
You're muted. Oh, there you go.
I'm now back out. Thank you. If there's any nonsense going on in the chat, we're going to ask you to leave, just as we would if you were being disrespectful or disruptive in an in-person meeting. Then we'll move on to voting. If you're a member of Grand Street Dems with voting privileges, and there are 90 of us, you have received emails from me this week, including one that just went out at 2 o'clock. With the voting link and a personal code you will need to enter at the voting website. If you have any questions about that or have problems voting, please let us know in the chat, though honestly, we might not be able to actually help with technical issues on that until the end of our meeting in about 2.5 hours. But voting will be open from now until we're done with our discussion after the candidate forum. I expect that whole thing to be wrapped up around 4:45. So again, when we're done with our candidates, we're going to stay in this Zoom for a members only discussion. We'll take a few minutes at that time to ask non-members to leave the meeting. This candidate forum right now is being recorded and will be posted to our website. The members only discussion that we have afterwards will not be recorded. So that's it. We are ready to start. I'm already 2 minutes late. Our first candidate is Gigi Lee. Gigi, can you unmute yourself and
Hi.
go ahead and introduce yourself, and you've got 4 minutes and then we'll start taking some questions.
Sure. So before we get down to business, just want to introduce everyone to the newest month-old member of District 1. Say hi. She's a little sleepy, but that's Jemmy. She's a month old as of yesterday. So just wanted everyone to say hi. Okay, who am I gonna take her? So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Gigi Lee, and I'm here today to seek the Grand Street Dems endorsement for council member for District 1. I know this is the third time I've been able to address some of the members, so I apologize if there's some repetition, but a little bit about me. I was born in Hong Kong and came over to the United States as a young child, around 3 years old, and first in my family to go to college, graduate from college, third generation Lower Manhattan resident, and was really impacted by growing up as an immigrant in New York City, helping my parents navigate different bureaucracies and infrastructures, and then, wanting to give back, and went to social work school. And since then have spent my entire adult life really working on how to help individuals in different capacities when they need it most. So working with families impacted by domestic violence, advocating for citywide expansion of after school and universal preschool, tripling the size of the summer youth employment program. And then on a more local level, was served on Community Board 3 for just under 10 years, and had the opportunity to serve the Lower East Side and Chinatown for 4 of those years as board chair. And so some of the priorities that I will really be focusing on when elected for city council are building new affordable housing and protecting existing affordable housing, including NYCHA and Section 8 housing, continuing advocating for, based on my deep policy knowledge of caregiving, early childhood education, youth programs, as well as senior programs. The city is going to go through at least 2, perhaps 3 more very incredibly tough budgets, and tough decisions are going to have to be made around what to cut and what to save. And I think that having experience with budgets and having experience working in a nonprofit with nonprofits, particularly a lot of the settlement houses in the Lower East Side, gives me a really on the ground, hands-on experience on contracting, on service delivery, and then of course, COVID. I know many of us have been impacted personally by COVID. I had a family member who's a frontline worker pass away in March during the first wave. And so the issues around access, disparities around health services, those are all things that impact me and deeply. And also just the general issue of government accessibility. I think that especially in times of need, which I think everyone is experiencing now, is when government should really be able to step up and help address issues. And we clearly see a gap in that. So I do feel like between my nonprofit experience, for the past 2 years serving as Chief of Staff for Councilmember Margaret Chin, that the council position is a very natural continuation of my service, particularly for the Lower East Side. And I'm ready to start on day one on a myriad of issues. And I hope that I will have your support, and I'll be able to bring broad coalitions and the neighborhoods together in a cohesive way. And you know, this district is such a great place to live and work, and I want to make sure that it continues to be that way, that our next generation has the opportunity to do that. That is, you know, I think about that now even more than ever. I really am ready to start and work for you all, and start fighting for the things that are important to us. And I would be honored to have your support. So I'm going to leave the rest of my time for questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Gigi. Thank you so much. And sincere congratulations. That's really wonderful news. Our first question is from Kim Sillen. Kim, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you. Hi. Also, congratulations for me. Good to see a baby these days. So the first question is something I'd like to ask all the candidates, and is that, do you support the city's current ESCR plan? And how would you mitigate the impact, both health-wise and emotionally, on the community, especially NYCHA residents who are going to be at the forefront of the brunt of that?
Okay, thank you for your question. So I do believe that resiliency and recovery work needs to happen throughout the city, right? It's been 8 years since Superstorm Sandy, and we've seen a lot of delays and postponements on these issues. Do I think that the plan is, you know, perfect? No. Your question around it impacting NYCHA residents and it disproportionately, absolutely true. I think we need to hold the city accountable for a couple of things. One is that there was a long list of improvements to open spaces throughout Council District 1 and 2. Some of those are underway, some of those have been completed. I think recently you've seen some new open space at Little Flower. We have other improvements in parks and open space nearby that were in the pike already, like Luther Gulick, like Seward Park, which got upgrades, which are now, you know, nicer, more accessible open spaces for the neighborhood. So I think continuing to think about creative ways, such as utilizing open DOE spaces, right? What are the existing open NYCHA spaces that can be used, right? We have to be creative in these times to think about, you know, Governor's Island is open. You know, let's continue fighting for a free ferry that goes from the Lower East Side to Governor's Island to make sure that, you know, that there's additional easy access to open spaces for the residents of the Lower East Side.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Can I follow up quickly with that, or no?
You know, I'm sorry. I'd really like to just try to get as many different
Thank you for
topics.
that
And
answer.
if there's time, we'll come back. Thanks. Next up is Dominic Berg. Can you unmute?
Hi. Hello, Gigi. Hello, Gemma.
Hi, Dominic.
Welcome, Gemma. So, Gigi, I know you and I worked closely together on the Spura development, which is now Essex Crossing. What do you feel that the community is at a tipping point for development, and how do you balance, you know, you talked about bringing more affordable housing. How do you balance the massive development that we have, and how do you plan on challenging developers and trying to get what's right for the community from them? And again, do you feel like we're at a tipping point, and how do you balance that with affordable housing and other types of development?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I do feel like we are at a tipping point, and I think that with land use issues, we have to take each land use project first and foremost on its own docket, right? Like for each individual project, but then also zoom out and take a look at what are some of the secondary factors, what are some of the tertiary impacts that have locally, right? I think that Essex Crossing, if we could replicate that process, not the waiting for 60 years part of it, but the fact that it went through the community board, it went through extensive community input for almost 2 years, and to really understand what it is that the community wants out of a project that will impact the community directly. And get some of those amenities, right? I've heard in conversations with some of the Grand Street Dem members that they feel like I'm pro-development, you know, and this is why I'm happy that you asked this question, Dominic, is that I'm for pro-housing equity and affordable housing, right? And so do I feel like, I don't feel like the current mandatory inclusionary housing percentages are sufficient. Even with Essex Crossing, I think something that a lot of you may not know is that even up until the very day that the press conference happened, we were not at 50% affordability. And so these are things that in these projects we have to fight for, and that, you know, I think it would be great if we could get every single project to have 50% of affordable housing in perpetuity, but it takes negotiation, and it takes the community to come together and really work together on developing a consensus. That being said, there are projects which I think off the bat are non-starters. And if that's the case, I would be very forthcoming on that, about that as well. Particularly for the Lower East Side, I think that there has been a lot of development. We know that there are two more buildings that are proposed that are 100% affordable. And that one, you know, that one is going to be fairly low rise or consistent with the existing Grand Street Guild buildings. And I think that 100% affordable housing is hard to argue against. But, you know, I think that we need to also think about some of the other community boards in Council District 1 that have not been doing their fair share, because it should not all fall on CB3, right? So what I can commit to is being open and honest about these conversations about why I support or don't support a development project. I don't, for example, I don't believe that the 4 proposed mega towers on the waterfront, I don't support that. I have some serious concerns about the Go Broom project and the height there. I think that there should have been more discussion and more outreach. So I think it depends on the project itself, and then also zooming out and looking at the overall impact on the community.
Thanks, Gigi. Ian, you're up next. Ian Rosenberg.
Thanks. Hi. I'm glad you're here today with us, but I do want to ask, as Councilmember Chin's Chief of Staff, it was very distressing for me, and I think other club members, but I can only speak for myself, that we've only had Councilmember Chin attend one Grand Street Dems event, and that was 3 years ago. And that, as far as I know, that neither you nor Councilmember Chin has ever attended any Grand Street Dems events or meetings until you decided to run for office. I'd like you to explain your lack of involvement with your local club in the community.
No, thank you for that. What I have worked on issues that are important to the membership, such as the resiliency in the park, the traffic issues on Grand Street, as well as the M14 bus. You're correct that I have not, I've been with the council member's office for about 2 years, and I have not attended your meetings. But what I can commit to is that you will see me moving forward. If elected, you will see me a lot. I think that if you look at my time at the community board, I'm a very hands-on, very present member and individual. And so what I can commit to is that you'll be seeing me, probably baby in tow, not only frequently in the Lower East Side, but at your events and meetings.
Here we go. Hi, thanks. Next up is Amy Chen.
Hi, thanks, Jeremy. Hi, Gigi.
Hi, Amy.
In all of the conversations we've had with candidates, I have yet to hear of anybody talk about child welfare, and so I'm going to bring it up now.
Sure.
I'm concerned about youth in foster care. It's disproportionately made up of youth LGBTQ and people of color. And I'm reading in the New York Times about youth in foster care who are in shelters or riding the subways, or at the very best, they're couch surfing. And I'd like to understand how you, with your background in not-for-profit services, how can you help shape the city's ill-equipped response to these kids who are lost in a system?
Yes. So actually, this is one of the policy areas I worked on when I was running my nonprofit, specifically on policies regarding with ACS, with runaway and homeless youth, the funding to 24-hour drop-in shelters. There's only actually one LGBT-friendly 24-hour drop-in center in the entire city of New York. And also we're seeing, especially with COVID, a lot, a steep decline in reporting of child welfare, neglect and abuse. And we all know it's not because it's not happening. It's just there's a steep decline in reporting for a lot of reasons, right? And so, you know, as a social worker, I'm a mandated reporter, so I understand you know, how important this issue is. I think what this comes down to is fighting for funding and services that we know through research make a difference for young people, right? When children age out of foster care, the city should have a suite of services that helps them, you know, pay a certain number of months of rent, so that you know, they can afford rental deposit, thinking about workforce training and making sure that they have jobs, right? There are some root issues here that the city is not addressing because it's not thinking very concretely about what these children need. One of the things I worked on with ACS is limiting the number of cases each social worker can carry while at ACS, so that we know that each family is getting adequate attention and services and follow-up. And I think that those are some of the key issues that have to be addressed for this population, and that they know where these services are, what they're entitled to, and that we make sure that they get connected to them.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Next on my list here is Bill Ferns.
Hi, how are you? So these are two related questions. One is, it sounds like you prefer to address each development project individually, as opposed to addressing neighborhood-wide rezoning plans, such as the Chinatown Working Group's plan, which would address the South Street super towers, but also a lot of development, potential development around here, like Henry Street and Cherry Street. So I'd like to actually get some clarity if you are opposed to neighborhood-wide. The second thing is, everyone's for affordability. If the devil's in the details, what do you think of the area median income, the AMI, is that a reasonable metric? Thank you.
Yeah, so no. So when it comes to neighborhood rezonings, absolutely, we need to look at the bigger picture there. When it comes to Chinatown Working Group, you know, I chaired the Chinatown Working Group for 2 years. I represented CB3 on the Chinatown Working Group, I think for 6 of the 8 years that it was active. So I was very involved in the development of the entire plan. And also when I was chair at CB3, did a lot of work with the land use committee so that the community board would be in support of as many sections of the plan as could pass land use and the full board. So I'm very familiar with that plan, and I do understand that had we done a rezoning earlier, that the 4 mega towers on the waterfront, that we wouldn't even be faced with that horrible situation. So to answer your question, for individual developments, yes, we have to start looking at some of the fine print for the individual ones, but for community-wide rezonings, yes, of course, we have to look at the larger picture. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot the second half of your question.
It was about the AMI, the area.
Oh,
meeting,
yes, absolutely. I think we should aim for, it's the question of, yes, affordable housing, but affordable to who, right? So absolutely, I feel like we should aim for AMIs that are more reflective of the residents that are currently living there. I think that there's a lot of funny math that happens when you allow developers to do work around, what is truly affordable, especially because we're seeing luxury housing development outpacing affordable. And so you see those numbers being skewed all the time, and that's just not reflective of the families that we want to benefit from the affordable housing that is being built.
All right, so thank you so much. I have to apologize. I'm going to apologize for this every time for the speed dating quality of these forums, but that was 20 minutes. I really appreciate everybody getting those questions in. For anybody I didn't get to, if you want to drop a question in the chat, and if Gigi, you stick around for a couple of minutes, maybe you can answer some things there.
I'll also put all my contact information in the chat as well.
That would be great. Thank you. And also, if anybody's got their hand up and wants to ask questions for the next candidate, just leave your hand up and you'll be first in line. So thanks very much, Gigi. We've got our next candidate coming up, and that is Tiffany Winbush. Tiffany, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? And
hi, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you? So you got 4 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we're going to do some speed questions for you as well. Thanks.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share more information about myself with the Grand Street Dems. So I'll just kick it off from there. So I am a 15-year resident of Lower Manhattan. I've lived in the financial district since I relocated to New York in 2005. I am a transplant from Louisiana. I still have very close ties there. All of my family lives there, as well as my husband's family. We are proud parents of two. I have a daughter who is school age, and she is a public school student in the Seaport area, and I have a son who is a rising 4-year-old who will be in pre-K at public school next year. I relocated to New York City in the dead of winter, 2005, did not know many people at that time in order to pursue my career as well as reunite with my husband. And when I relocated here, I knew that I needed to get plugged in with the city and with my local community in order so that I can make this home. I immediately had an opportunity to begin partnering with an organization within Manhattan called Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in order to mentor high school girls and youth, focusing on leadership, life skills, and just really preparing them for life after high school and ultimately college, if that's the path that they decided to take. In addition to working with that organization, I also, got active downtown with my local community board. And my, activism and passion for working with the community really stems from my upbringing. I live, I am from a family, we were always very active in our community. Voting was always on the table. It's something we did as a family regularly. Knowing what issues were impacting our local community and our neighborhood was in our wider city was very important. We oftentimes would rally our neighbors to ensure they knew the issues, to make sure that they were registered vote, to drive them to the polls on the day of voting. I come from a household of a mom who was a single parent to 4. And, she always instilled in us hard work and civic engagement, right? She was born in the Jim Crow South 11 years before the 1965 Voting Rights Act was passed. And so each time I go into the voting booth, I think of her and so many others who were born into a country where they did not have an opportunity to, vote upon their birth and their country in which they were born. One of my earliest memories of activism was working with my family to rally rally our community when the white supremacist David Duke was running for governor of Louisiana in 1991. We knew that that could not happen, so we rallied together and we made sure that everyone who was within speaking distance to our family knew what was on the ballot, knew what was on stake, and they went to the polls. And so that has led me to continue my activism. That's led me to focus a lot on my hard work. I was, being from a household of a single parent, I wanted to make sure that I did my part. So as early as 15, I got my first job, and I recall working, going to work at like 5 o'clock in the morning before I went to high school, so that I could work before school started, because I had after school extracurricular activity commitment. So I give a lot of credit to my passion and my desire to help others directly from my family. And so because I was passionate about being involved and being active, I did have an opportunity to be appointed to the local community board 1, where I served 3 terms. So in addition to mentoring high school girls, focusing on the community board, I also worked very closely with a nationwide organization here in the city advocating for the rights of women and girls on the state level. And then because I am a parent of a public school student and I thoroughly believe in, making sure that parents are connected and engaged, I've served a number of different roles on the executive board within my daughter's PTA. All of that leads me to want to run for city council to represent our district, because I feel like I am probably like a lot of people in the district, right? I, don't have any political connections. I've never held a political appointment, but what I am doing is that I am a part of my community. I am active in my community. I am working to raise a family. I was working, at a career. I am working to just make sure that, everyone within my, bubble and people that I'm connected to are well aware of what's going on and what's going to impact them and how they can be active and be involved. And I really want to be that bridge and that voice for people who feel like, what? Maybe my voice is not being heard just because I am not the person that you'll see, standing on the front line of a protest or, donating to a campaign, but I still feel like my voice should be heard. And I really want to be a representative for them. And that's one of the primary reasons why I am focusing on representing this district on the New York City Council. I'm also very much a believer in inclusive communities. I have an opportunity to work very closely with some local mom in my communities who are focusing on welcoming everyone into our community, and that includes shelter residents. Made that happen, that the residents from the Upper West Side Lucerne happen to make their new home in the financial district. So while we are, advocating on behalf of people who call the district home, should there be any new residents that call this district home, we want to make sure that they also feel that welcome and inclusivity as well. So I hope that this information has been helpful. You can certainly always visit my website for more information, tiffany4nyc.com, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the members may have at the moment.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. Let's jump right into questions. Linda Jones, I see your hand up. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Thank you. You didn't discuss land use issues. I see this, your current emphasis, but of course it's in Community Board 3. I'm a member of the Land Use Committee and the Landmarks Committee, and we spend all our time dealing with land use issues. And the current rules are very unsatisfactory. The MIH was a very nice idea, but it does not tend to yield the levels of affordability that are needed in the community. The developers set those levels of affordability at just as high as they possibly can, and it ends up being almost middle-income people instead of lower-income people getting that housing. Furthermore, the percentage of housing that they are required to offer is much too low. So we end up with higher income buildings, luxury buildings with a tad of affordable housing of some sort in it. And I don't know what to do about it, but I really think that the whole question of how we allocate affordable housing in the city needs to be addressed.
Well, I think what we have found true for far too long is that the developers in the city really had the upper hand, right? They were able to essentially dictate to our elected officials, exactly what they were going to give to us, and we had to be okay with it, and we had to settle for it because we knew that we needed, even if it was a sliver of affordable housing, that we needed that for our communities and for our residents. If we think that affordable housing is a necessity now, we have to think about how much more of a necessity it's going to be once that moratorium on eviction runs out at the beginning of the year. And then you have tons of people, possibly people who have not paid rent since March. Well, they essentially have a bill due that they will not be able to afford to pay. And so that's why affordable permanent housing is important now. And being that we're at a point where, yes, there are some people who are shifting away from New York City and are leaving here, no longer calling it their home. So that means that there will be developers who currently have housing apartments on the market at the moment that more than likely will not get filled. There are, buildings that are going up at this very moment that more than likely will not get filled, and also the ones that are in the pipeline. And so this is really an opportunity for the city to go back and essentially demand that those developers, you either want to decide to have empty buildings sitting there, accumulating no type of financial recourse for you, or you want to work with us to ensure that we can get people in those places and ensure that it's affordable and permanent going forward. So we have a lot of work to do with the mandatory inclusionary housing. We know that the AMI is too high. Oftentimes it does make sure that those higher income individuals are able to live in those communities, but not necessarily those lower income individuals. And, kind of off topic as relating to that, if we are hoping that people are able to move into communities where they can call home, or where they feel safe and stable, oftentimes when the city is looking at their overall lottery housing, we have to make sure that people are not just cornered to only receiving a lottery that's within the district in which they currently live. They should be able to go and apply and get first priority at any affordable housing unit, and it should not matter if you already live in the community or not.
Okay, thank you. Jane, you've had your hand up for a while. Jane Loke.
Hi. So it's a little bit somewhat related to affordability, but it's sort of not. I am a resident, small business owner, and a property owner of District 1. And so I come at it from an angle that I think not too many people do, because I'm coming at it from a couple of different places. People just automatically assume that, if you're a small business owner, you do this, or if you're a resident, you do this, or you're a small property owner, you do this, and I'm all three. And one of the things that when you talk about affordability, as a small property owner, as a small business owner, I pay rent. So I understand that from the commercial side, at least, not specifically to do with housing. But as a small property owner, I pay property taxes. And so I see that side of that. And I do know that my property taxes go up much, much faster than my rent does. And nobody really talks about that. But like for the past, I would say 7 years, I think it went up on an average of 8% a year. And, rent-wise, I'm only collecting maybe 3% increases, but probably less than that. And so it's far, far outpacing that. And if you talk about affordability, like it's not affordable to be a property owner, which if you want to be a long-term resident of New York City, it would be great to own your own property. And I don't think that's something that you should discourage. So my question to you is, when you talk about affordability, how are you going to control the fact that the landlord for everybody ultimately, which is the city, is running away with their rent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the question, Jane. I appreciate it. So I think that we've seen, especially in the time of COVID, we already knew how important small businesses were to our community. They're oftentimes the backbone of our communities. And I think now in the time of COVID, we've seen even more how important that they are, right? So, unfortunately, around every corner, you have a small business owner who has had to make a very tough decision to close. On the other end, you do have community members who are doing their best to support those small business owners, where it's making sure that they shop local or, eat at their restaurants, wherever it may be. So I think small business owners being on a pedestal as they are now is very much warranted, because they offer so much to our wider community. You talk about how your, rent in your taxes increase, year over year more than anything that you would see if you were a resident. And, unfortunately, I think what we have to do, especially as our city is about to see a major deficit, is that everyone has to really think about, where they can cut and what they can cut in order so that all of us can rise up, right? So it just does not need to be one group of people who are being able to be successful and rise. So if that means that the city has to look for other avenues in order to collect their taxes and it's not all on the small business owners, that's something that they have to do. If we want this city to be a city of small business owners for years to come, we are going to have to offer them some type of rent relief. And I think that, in this very moment, landlords have started to realize how difficult, how much more of a burden it is for small business owners when they have to pay, those exorbitant prices as it pertains to rent. So yes, I would like to ensure that our small business owners are at the forefront when we're making these decisions. And when the city makes decisions, whether it be about property taxes or anything business related, we're not just thinking about the large corporations and keeping them here, because it's our small business owners who are really making sure that our communities, get the resources that they need.
Great, thank you. Bill, you're next. Bill Ferns.
Okay, thank you. So this is a development related question, which is one of the problems with the current zoning system in New York City is that there are no height limits, and developers have been exploiting this loophole to build skinny, super tall luxury towers, which are unaffordable to most people. So will you commit to fighting for rezoning to include height limits when you are in the city council? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Bill. I know how important it is to ensure that zoning or rezonings don't negatively impact the community as a whole. Right at this very moment, I live, very close to the seaport, and many of our community members are essentially fighting and pushing back so that a very well-known developer does not get to build an 80-foot story tower that does not go hand in hand with the historic nature of the seaport. When it comes to rezoning, I am not anti-development. I do understand that if we are going to have more affordable housing options, that we have to build more housing. I completely understand that. But when you're thinking about rezoning and changing the face of a community and changing the vibe and the look and the feel, I am not comfortable with doing so if it's going to manipulate that community so much that it's not even noticeable. So yes, I do think that, zoning has to be a factor that's taken in, or height level has to be a factor that's taken into consideration when rezoning occurs. I know that, in addition to what's going on, in my very immediate local neighborhood, I know we also have, rezonings that are going to happen in our community. And when the final decision is made, I don't want those decisions to be that neighborhood is so unrecognizable, and the people who, who call that neighborhood home no longer feel as though it's a community for them. So that certainly has to be a factor.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question is from Spencer Berg.
I'm muted. Sure. My question is, I'm a climate activist. I'm also a student, a senior year, and so it's a lot that's on my mind. But my question is about if you were elected as a council member, what would you do to address the climate crisis, to mitigate it? What actions would you support or actions you would take? Because, I think New York City sometimes is often people undervalue the impact it would have, in our country. So what would you do to make sure that our changes made here, or what changes you would make, could have the biggest impact on the outcome of this crisis?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. And I will say, I would like your name. That's my son's name. So I have a passion for the name of Spencer. So we know that climate and environmental resiliency is very important. I know Gigi just mentioned that we are 8 years after Superstorm Sandy, and being someone who was in the thick of it, I'm not confident that 8 years later we're prepared for the next Superstorm Sandy or whatever it may be. My roots are from Louisiana, so I'm very familiar with hurricanes and how how that devastation can impact communities for sure. I think we certainly have to do several things. Number one, we have to make sure that our shorelines are protected against any type of storm surge. But upon doing that, we have to make sure that we are not being intrusive and taking away amenities from the neighborhood, especially those who need those amenities so much. We've learned, especially since COVID, how important outdoor space is. So we need to make sure that that is intact. But we do need to make sure that our shorelines are able to protect us from any type of storm surge that will happen. So that needs to be a priority. And we need to focus on that and do that and not wait another 10 years to make it another 8 years to make it happen. We don't want to find ourselves in another Superstorm Sandy and that we're not prepared. Another thing that we also should focus on is that, our commercial buildings, should not have options or voluntarily participate in programming that's going to help with our overall, protecting our climate in New York City. So the rules and regulations that are set forth by our city cannot be optional for our commercial buildings. They have to participate in these programs and they have to do it. And there's no, we'll get to it, or if it's something on our radar, we have to do it, especially the very large office buildings, so many of which that we have here in New York City. And then finally, as well, from a more level of residence and things of that nature. I am surprised even from like the small things that don't happen, within communities. And I've seen it, my neighbors within my own building, like just the lower barrier of doing simple things like recycling, because that's going to help our planet, years from now. That is not even a common practice among some people, unfortunately. Composting and things of that nature. We have to focus on really, recycle and reusing more so of, creating new things is one thing that we can focus on. And I think that will help us and that will prepare as we deal with climate change. And Spencer, you're exactly right. I don't think people consider how much of an impact it would have on the larger, world if New York City is impacted. I mean, we are, an island surrounded by, water. And if, the financial capital of the world is not able to do what we need to do, that certainly is going to impact so many other communities and really our global economy as a whole.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, Tiffany, thanks so much. That's our 20 minutes with you. Thanks so much for joining us. If you've got contact information, you want to drop that in the chat, that would be great. Again, thanks. And we're going to move on to our next candidate.
Okay. Thanks for having me, guys.
Take care. Next up is Jenny Lowe. Jenny, are you there? There you are.
I'm here. Can you see me?
I can see you now. Go ahead, you've got 4 minutes for an intro and then we'll get right to questions.
Great, thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you today. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, share with you my vision for Council District 1, and also seek your endorsement. I've met many of you over the last few years and worked together with some of you. So please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a lifelong advocate for Lower Manhattan, having served for 25 years as a district leader and working and serving on the board of a nonprofit organization for 30 years that helps countless immigrants and low-income individuals become economically self-sufficient, an organization that's $190 million in annual budget. And so I am ready to put my proven skills and experience, passion for Lower Manhattan, and my proven track record to work and fight for Lower Manhattan as the council member for District 1 and to help District 1 and the city recover from the devastation of COVID-19. So I've been in this district, in this country for over 45 years, and you may ask, so what have you done for the district, Lower Manhattan and the community? Well, so I've been in this country 45 years, lived and grew up and lived in this district for all those years, except for the 4 years I went to Yale University. As a district leader for 45 years, for 25 years, sorry, I have worked with the club and leaders in the community to raise political awareness in our community and empower people of color to run and successfully run for office. I have expanded in that work, we have expanded political voice and empowerment to the residents in our community. And I also serve, as I mentioned before, on the board of the Chinese American Planning Council for 30 years. And we have helped individuals, families from cradle to grave, all the services that's necessary. And most importantly, getting them job training that has living wage paid jobs in many of the industries. And I also have been on the board of the Eleanor Roosevelt Legacy Committee for the last 10 years. And it's an organization where we support pro-choice democratic women and successfully built a farm team of women and women of color to run for offices across the state. And currently, I am the director of the Administrative Services Division at the City Council in the office of Speaker Corey Johnson, where I manage a team of folks, and we handle and oversee the internal operations of the council. It's like the equivalent of a COO in a private company. And before that, I served for 2 years as director of the Community Engagement Division, where my team and I engaged New Yorkers through civic participation and enhanced their connection to the city council. So with all the experience that I have in my belly, I am ready to put decades of this experience to fight for working families, to get small business the help that they need, to continue to fight for affordable housing, and demand real and meaningful changes in the NYPD, and get access to healthcare for many of those in our community, as well as those who are in the front line, the healthcare workers as well, and improve the school system, the public school system that gave me the opportunity and opened up my horizon to this world, this great world of called America, and achieve the American dream. And finally, to help seniors and families with food insecurity that I have seen throughout my volunteer effort delivering free meals for Rethink Food NYC since early April. So far, while the organization have delivered over 2 million meals across the city, I am so proud to be part of the volunteer crew that's been doing free meal delivery since April of this year. And we have delivered by now close to over 650 meals to seniors across the city. And we also across the Lower East Side and Chinatown area. And we also work with folks who are in the Hillman housing, where they came to pick up meals every day for seniors in Hillman. And so this is where we are, right? COVID-19 devastated our city and our country and our district. Now we are moving forward to 2021, which will be a huge turnover year for the city council, as Jeremy had mentioned earlier. We need a council member who can get into work and does not need any training, right? I have a demonstrated track record in the private, public, and nonprofit sector, and be able to hit the ground running as your council member in District 1 and be able to represent and work with you very closely to continue to solve very difficult problems in our city and our district. People have been asking me to run for years.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
I'm ready to put my work, my experience and my heart to work for this district, and wanted to make sure that I give you time to ask me questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Let's get Fanny Ip. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, Jenny. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So my question, actually I have two questions, and they're on Chinatown. So Chinatown took a really big hit this year. You know, a lot of businesses are closed, and, you know, and a lot of businesses leaving. What ideas do you have, and how do you plan on bringing those businesses back, and also how do you plan on helping those small mom and pop business? And my second question is on 70 Mulberry Street. What are your thoughts on it? Are you for the preservation or for the demolishing, or or whatever? So that's it.
So that's a great question. Chinatown has been hit hard since the beginning of, before the pandemic even began, right? Began in March. We have seen people just stop coming because the occupant of the White House caused the virus, Chinese virus. People came, stores closed, restaurants closed. I have jumped right into volunteer mode when that happened. I have not only volunteered to help support small businesses, I also have called for, early on in March, called for the city and the state and wrote letters to elected officials asking them to declare Chinatown an economic distress zone, where similar to what they did with post 9/11 in downtown. Looking for support from the city where we can have tax holidays and deferral of a number of payments that the residents and businesses have to pay, including property tax, fines that they may have accumulated, and enable the city to support this business like we did. In post 9/11, I was a small business banker working for JP Morgan Chase Bank. I made loans to small business, collaborating with the SBA and the New York City's Economic Development Corporation in programs where we help businesses regain their footing and continue to thrive. So and also specifically back to Chinatown, I've been calling for and supporting efforts that will help rebuild Chinatown. Call for weekend street closures of vehicle traffic, just like what they do in Little Italy. But we got some strong resistance from the current council member. Didn't get anywhere. Now we found another way to help revitalize Chinatown. I and a number of community leaders, we are currently raising money in a project called Light Up Chinatown, where we will string lights across above the street, and hopefully that will give us more light from the darkness, but also encourage pedestrian traffic to help with our businesses, small businesses, and restaurants. If you go to Mott Street today, you will see between Bayard and Pell lights lit up, and we are looking to continue and building it block by block. And this is a commitment that I have for our neighborhood, not just Chinatown, but also Lower East Side. We need to find all innovative ways to be able to help small businesses. In reference to 70 Mulberry Street, it is a tremendous loss.
Can you try to make that a quick answer? Because I want to.
Yeah, it's a tremendous loss, and I advocate for the community to be together. I've called for community input, and the city is listening to us, and we still have more public sessions to go. We need community input. Everything that we want to do for that site has to incorporate the community input that is that can achieve the goal to benefit most of us. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm sorry to keep rushing this along, but I want to get to as many.
Good. I'm glad you are doing that.
Kenny Wind, you've got the next question.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to quickly follow up on something that came up at the last GSD meeting. You said that you didn't know if you're going to run for re-election as district leader in 2021 at the same time as city council. And you also said you weren't sure if you were going to remain as state committee member or if you were going to resign. Do you have an update, or are you still undecided on it?
So, Kenny, as you know, you probably know, you have seen me as the district leader and as the state committee women who have gone out day in and day out to support any issues that the community have. Being a district leader for 25 years and a state committee woman for the last 4 or 5 years, have given me the opportunity to work with people and to learn how to work with people, whether we agree or we don't agree. I am a lifelong learner where I learn to listen to people and understand their perspective. And I do that every day. These positions have set me up to run for city council and continue to do the work in a different way now, being a legislator along with helping communities solve problems. These are opportunities that I have value, and I'm very blessed to be able to be reelected for 25 years as a district leader, and I will take that experience with me and passion to serve the community with me when I get to the city council. Thank you for your question, Kenny.
Great, thank you. Marion Riddell.
Hi, Jenny. Nice to see you. How are you doing?
Hello.
So you've talked about a lot of things, and what always strikes me is how diverse this city council district is. And I'm curious so diverse, not just in how people are, ethnicity, race, income, but diverse in needs. So I'm curious what you think are the three most overriding important issues for the district, and what are the three things you've done that kind of speak to those?
Oh, that's a great question. And you are absolutely right. Our district is just as diverse in socioeconomic status of the people, situations of the folks, right? So I am someone who came from nothing. My family came to this country with almost nothing, and I came when I was 12 and not even knowing the alphabets. So I know what it takes to struggle and to make ends meet to support a family. And we have worked very hard. And I know the desires of the people who are in need. That's why I jumped right into action when COVID hits, because I've seen the lines of people getting free meals, the seniors who couldn't even carry the groceries. I work with people, and I volunteer and create a program to help seniors shop using their EBT card. So that's something that is it stays with me. I know that the experience. And at the same time, thanks to public education and hard work and support from the community, I have been able to succeed in my education, being a graduate with honors from Yale University, and coming back to have a successful career in the financial services. When I went into the financial services, I work in the areas where I make loans to small businesses, entrepreneurs, and women-owned businesses to help them get their first bank loan so that they can succeed and support their family. As a grant officer of a multi-million-dollar portfolio in Manhattan supporting nonprofit organizations, I have worked with nonprofit organizations that work in supporting education, job training with public, private, and nonprofit collaboration that have successfully trained people to get union-paying jobs. And I will take those experiences with me to fight for food insecurity, affordable housing, and most important, very important that have unveiled the need is the digital divide in our district. First focusing on prioritizing the students who are in shelters, students who are in housing that do not have internet, do not have consistent internet. If they do, if we do not fight for the students to continue their education under these very challenging difficulties, we will lose the time to be able to help them build their foundation to continue and be successful in later years in the school year. So having that experience, supporting family, having affordable housing for our residents, and supporting education in this moment, the top priority is eliminating the digital divide.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Bill Ferns, you're up next.
Hey, thanks. I missed I thought I'd get a note saying I'm on bat. Okay, so
Bill, did we lose you?
I just lost Bill completely.
No, he muted himself. Oh, here we go.
no, I thought I got a note saying Jeremy muted me.
I don't think so.
Gremlin in Zoom.
Yeah. Anyway, so you state that you have city council experience because you work with Speaker Johnson. But from my perspective, the city council has actually been doing a bad job at providing affordable housing with projects that keep in scale with their respective neighborhoods, as we see a bunch in this neighborhood, including the upcoming Go Broom project, which is scheduled to be taller than any other Essex Crossing building. So how will you legislate and vote differently in this area if you were on the city council? Thank you.
So my experience in the city council gives me the inside view of how it works. So from that experience, meaning that if I need to draft a legislation on a certain topic, I know who to call. I know all the folks who are in the finance area, finance division that will negotiate budgets about funding. Right? I know what it takes for us to get things done from the inside. Yes, Bill, I will take that experience with me, and as a council member, as someone that I have practiced and done myself all the time, all my adult life as a community advocate, I am the type of person, I listen to all perspectives. I don't agree with many of the affordable housing that result of in our district that can be, that as a council member that I am able to make an impact, I will be able to represent you as your council member by listening to you and your neighbors and others, all from all different perspectives. My goal, you're electing a council member to listen to everybody and find ways to work with folks to get the common goal, to achieve the common goal. I'm not going to be able to please everybody, that I am aware of, but what I can tell you and have demonstrated, I have done so, is to listen to all perspectives and have a meeting of minds on what the goal is, what is the result that we want that can benefit the most people in the district or in the neighborhood, on the block, you name it. That's how I operate. Thank you for your question, Bill.
Thanks. I think we've got one more question, time for one more question. That's going to go to Jan Lee, who's had his hand up for a little while. Go ahead, Jan.
All right. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jan.
Hi. I see that you outlined so many of the hardships that we have here in Chinatown, including food insecurity, which by no means has been solved, even with the tens of thousands of meals that have been delivered. We still have that issue. And a number of the issues that you talk about with small business is still very much ongoing. And as our COVID rate starts to increase, there's a sense of alarm across the United States, but across here in New York City as well. With that said, as a petitioner in the Article 78 lawsuit to stop the mega jail from being built in Chinatown, my group, Neighbors United Below Canal, has been very outspoken about the dangers involved in starting this $9 billion project now. As a council member, are you going to support the city's position on continuing with the building of the borough-based jail, starting with the one in Chinatown? Or are you going to listen to all of the issues that you have outlined, which are going to be far from being solved by the time you enter as a council member? Are you for the jail or against it?
So first of all, jail jail is a big issue. Yes, Jan. So thank you for your question. So the first thing is, I support the closure of Riker Island, and I strongly support criminal justice reform outlined with the recommendation by former Chief Justice Jonathan Littman. We have to get in the new 22nd century, maybe, on criminal justice reform. We have to find ways to be able to help folks rehabilitate. With the budget cut that is looming, and actually our city is broke, don't know where the money is going to come from by the time I get to the city council. And you're right, these issues are not going to get resolved until through 2021, right? So as I mentioned before, I am the type of person who would want to listen to all the views and understand where people's perspectives are coming from. And I will promise, and I will do that, listen to the view of your organization and the views of other organizations surrounding the Morro-based jail, particularly the one in Manhattan that is also in my backyard, right? So I think we need the process that this current mayor and others who have started about this Morro-based jails, and I'll just reference just Manhattan for now, since we're talking about that, is totally horrific. And we had a council member who did not engage the community when she found out about the process. To me, that process is wrong, and it has to start with full transparency, engaging all the stakeholders surrounding our neighborhood. And I'm just talking about just us in Lower Manhattan. So as a council member in the city council in 2022, I will be listening and talking and working with all the different perspectives about surrounding the jail or any other development, including the Two Bridges development, which also I'm against with the mega towers. So, you know, the days of someone who comes to you, a developer coming to you and telling you what's good for you and tell you that, oh, it's okay, you don't need that path mark at the corner of Cherry and Pike, and give you this ugly building that's next to it, that's wrong. That cannot happen. It will not happen under my watch. I will be working side by side with the residents of this district in any neighborhood that have developments that's proposed that's going to impact their life. It has to be a transparent, full, real participation process when it comes to land use. Thank you.
Okay, Jenny, thanks so much. Thank you. That's the end of our time with you, but thanks for stopping by. I encourage you, there are a couple of other questions that are hitting the chat. If you've got some time and can answer there, that would be great. If you don't have any more time, I understand, but you can scroll through there and see if there's something there you want to.
Yeah, I'll be happy to look through the chat again. I did that with the climate change question from Spencer, so I will do that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. We're going on to our next candidate now, who's Christopher Marte. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
There you go. All right, so Chris, you got 4 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll hit questions.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having this forum. My name is Christopher Marte. I'm running for City Council in District 1. For the past 3 years, I worked for an organization called Arena, where I helped to flip congressional seats and win Democrats a majority here in New York State Senate. I was born and raised on the Lower East Side, where my dad had a bodega under my building. I attended the local public school, studied abroad for college, and then started a career in finance. But as challenges arose in our neighborhood, I realized I wanted to help the community that raised me. So I started getting involved locally. Through this work, I realized that many of our issues came from the same source. So in 2017, I ran for city council in a really tight primary, but we fell short by just 1% of the turnout. But what we did was amazing. We brought together neighbors who never had a reason to work together before, and what we started outlived Election Day. And that coalition we helped build achieved major victories all along the way. Within months of the primary, tenants at 85 Bowery were being evicted from their home. They immediately called me to come over since many did not speak English. I helped organize our neighbors to come out and stand with them during 2 hunger strikes. Here in New York, tenants who get evicted almost never get to come back home. But after 9 months, and with the power of our community, they were finally able to return. Soon after, the plans to build 4 mega luxury towers in 2 bridges started moving forward. In my last campaign, we fought against them, but now we had to figure out how to stop them without the support of our council member. And we did. We collected 5,000 petitions, delivered them to City Hall, and even though elected officials continue to ignore our voices, we won a lawsuit that stopped the construction. When the mayor announced the new mega jail in Chinatown, our council member said it was a done deal there was nothing we could do to stop it. I co-founded NUBC to prove that new jails would not end mass incarceration. I led the largest march through Chinatown in over 50 years, with thousands of residents demanding no new jails. Just a few months ago, our lawsuit won and sent the city back to the drawing board. These campaigns were born of dire circumstances, but we won because of relentless hope. We proved that when people from all across this district come together and fight together, we can achieve something unimaginable. The past 8 months have changed our community drastically. It can make the city council race look very small. But where COVID impacts us the most, it's in our homes and in our neighborhoods. And that's where your council member can make the biggest difference. Our plan for recovery focuses on 3 main issues: land use, climate change, and our standard of living. First, I will implement community-based land use policy like the Chinatown Working Group Plan. The plan will help reclaim affordability of our neighborhoods and create a comprehensive framework for development in our district. Second, I'm running to improve the quality of life instead of cutting the budget of essential services like sanitation and education. We need to have free Wi-Fi for students and create more busways and bike lanes for commuters. And third, we can't stumble from crisis to crisis. We must locally address climate change. If Hurricane Sandy hit again tomorrow, we would not be protected. I am ready to fill in that leadership void to create a comprehensive resiliency plan that has community input. My team has been doing the work a council office should be doing. We deliver food to seniors in the co-ops in NYCHA. We fundraise to get PPEs for home attendants. We connected women-owned businesses with local community banks to apply for the PPP loans. And we actually hosted free COVID testing sites for all residents. Today, I ask for your vote and endorsement, because even with Joe Biden in the White House, New York has a long road to recovery. We know the next few years will be difficult, but we do know that if we organize, unite, and have a plan for our district, we already proven that there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Thank you again for having me tonight, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thanks so much, Chris. Let's get to questions. Now I don't, yeah, Amy Chen was up. There you are.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, Christopher. I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked all the previous candidates, and I'd like to know how child welfare, particularly youth in foster care, how that figures into your 3 main priorities. I find it unacceptable that we've got youth in shelters or couch surfing or on transportation, and it leads to homelessness and incarceration. So if we address it in child welfare, I'd like to know how you use your elected position to do that.
I agree, and thank you for answering that important question. I think the biggest issues and one way we could tackle it from a city council person perspective is about budget. You know, one of the biggest issues that the city does is whenever there's an issue like this regarding children in foster homes or the homeless population, we want to conduct studies or create a task force. However, there's already organizations on the ground that can deal with these issues. And so it's making sure that we allocate our budget to support community-based organizations that are in the front lines and know how to deal with the issues at hand. I do believe having a database strategy is important, but sometimes we can't wait and we can't waste time. We got to make sure that we support, especially in the Lower East Side. We have tons of nonprofits that can do the work now, but they don't have the funding from the city to actually address the issue.
Thanks. Judy Wind. Go ahead and unmute.
There we go.
Yep.
Chris, I know you've always been active in the community. Can you talk a little bit more about what you've been doing since the last election, even how your work with Arena has helped in making contacts that will be useful to you as a city council person?
Thanks, Judy. It's good to see you. So as I said, for the past 3 years, I work for an organization called Arena, where we help train and support candidates to flip seats throughout this country. In 2018, we had a huge win here in New York where we led, we're the biggest strategists and funders of the No IDC movement, and it elected amazing candidates like Zelner Myrie and Jessica Ramos, and really much changed the course of our state. I've worked with these candidates in developing their policies and the campaign strategies, as well as working with organizations like the WFP to make sure that we got all New Yorkers to get out and vote. This is very useful because it already shows that we know how to develop policy and actually get it through and really reform structurally New York City, and especially how they deal with constituents.
Great, thank you. Valentina Jones, are you still there?
Hi, my question is this. In terms of your involvement, I see that you have crossed different lines and you've dealt with different people. And one of the things is, how do you plan to unify people? Because one of the issues that is very clear, and I think the governor has acknowledged it, is that after we've had Ebola, we now have COVID, we're getting something else. And so how would you shape things? Because I think we now see that that will make a difference for almost everything else. It will impact education, healthcare, whatever. How we deal with pandemics or contagious illness that come to New York City.
Yeah, well, locally, what we need to do is build a coalition to make sure that we not only have experts on the ground, but there's community input. For example, when COVID happened, there was no structure to deliver food to PPEs to the most vulnerable people. And it could have really avoided deaths if we knew how to react instantly. Right now, we have organizations that could deal with climate change and be prepared from day one, like LES Ready, but we need to make sure that we have a network of organizations to tackle the next pandemic or the next crisis. So I'm willing to get people around the table. We have done that before, especially fighting land use issues, but it's using that unified coalition to tackle these issues that we can't predict now.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks. Next question from Lee Berman. Lee?
Hi, Chris. This is a follow-up to something that Kenny asked, previous candidate. You're currently the Democratic State Committee member for the entire 65th district. If elected to the City Council, will you retain that position, or will you decline to run for re-election for that?
Thank you, Lee. I would resign. If I win the June primary, I will resign or announce my resignation of the state committee. I truly believe that as an elected official, it's not reform to hold as many titles as possible. I think what we need to do, and what I'm committed to doing, is if winning the Democratic primary, I will resign immediately to make sure whoever is next has enough time to do outreach to our community, but also realize the importance of this position within our Democratic Party.
Great, thanks. Keen Berger.
Well, locally, Chris, what about in this Grand Street Democrats? How are you going to work with us, or what's your involvement more locally?
Thanks, Keen. As a state committee person, I committed to Grand Street Dems when they endorsed me 2 years ago that I was going to be an active member in their club and be an activist with them on issues that they care about, like traffic, graffiti in synagogues, or just being out there to clean our parks and plant bulbs. And I think that's not going to be any different as a council member. One of the easiest examples that I can think of is participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is when you allow residents of your district to vote at least $1 million of where it should be allocated to. So I'm planning to use Grand Street Dems as a vehicle to make sure that all the residents know about this program, that they have a say not only on what gets proposed, but what gets voted on. I think this is going to increase civic engagement throughout our district, and I think everyone, especially on Grand Street, needs a voice on how our budget is allocated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question from Kenny Wind. Kenny?
Yeah, hey, Chris. I just had a quick question. The South Street mega towers were brought up a couple times earlier. And I was just wondering if you could explain to me what the difference is between Corey Johnson's lawsuit that I don't think won, and the lawsuit that you helped rally people and get behind that I think won. I'm not sure if you could just explain the differences.
Thank you, Kenny. As Kenny mentioned, there was 2 lawsuits. There was one by the city, by Corey Johnson's office and Margaret Chin's office, that wanted these developments to go through a ULURP process. However, many of the residents that live nearby there, NYCHA residents, Section 8 residents, we were really concerned because Margaret has never voted no on a ULURP project. And we didn't have the confidence that our council member would stand with the residents of that area. And so we organized our neighbors. I helped mobilize a legal strategy. And what we were able to achieve was to get an injunction in these towers because we made an argument that these towers were illegal with the underlying zoning that's in place now. And that lawsuit actually won and got the injunction. There is an appeal, so we'll learn more soon, but this really shows the power of community, not only listening to them, but mobilizing, organizing your community, and empowering them to file a lawsuit against the city.
Thanks. Bill Ferns. Bill?
Hi, yeah, Chris, you already answered my development questions pretty thoroughly. So I'm going to go back to something someone asked earlier, which is I think a lot of people around here don't feel like we've been getting great constituent services in our area or responses from Councilwoman Chin's office. So how would you redo constituent services, or what would you focus on, or anything like that related to this?
Yeah, I think it's building the trust with residents everywhere. And what we've been able to do in the past, not only 3 years, but 5 years, is reach out to neighborhoods, not just on Grand Street, in Chinatown, in Tribeca, and start working with people for things they care about, whether it's mega land use issues in the waterfront or down in the seaport, or fighting against a mega jail that the mayor proposed for our area. It takes a lot of work to build this network of residents and build this coalition, but that's something I'm committed to do. And since being active in this community, a lot of residents actually just come to me first sometimes about their housing issue, about losing their job and how can they apply for any loan or unemployment. And we've been able to respond, whether it's directing them to the right agency in the city government or making sure that they know what they can do to help improve their situation. But I think constituent service is always hard, but you have to have that energy and that will to knock on a door, to go to a Grand Street Dem meeting, to go to a community board meeting. Because if you're not present, then people feel disconnected to their local representation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Leitner. Brett, are you there?
Yes. Hey there. Hey, Chris. Quick question for you. For parents with kids in the public school system, wondering if you have any thoughts on how you would address or advocate for greater equity of school choice.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things we've been advocating, and I advocated for in my 2017 campaign, is that we need to redraw the district lines. And we started seeing some movement with that. I know CEC2 just passed a resolution to allow elementary school students to apply to D2 schools, but we really need to rechange how this works. We have a perfect opportunity with the census. And with the new census, with the new population data, we should draw a line. We should draw lines that are more equitable and make sure that people have the opportunity. For folks who don't understand what education district line are, District 1, Education District Council 1 is just Chinatown, Lower East Side, while District 2 is everything from the Upper East Side going down to the West Side and wraps around District 1. And it really shows the inequality and segregations of our school system.
Thank you. Next up is Dominic Berg.
Hey, Chris. So I saw in your chat you put a link to your resiliency plan. So I haven't had a chance to look at it, but can you just talk about how you think the council or the mayor, in terms of getting the money in the budget for what's in your plan, should be gone about? Is it cutting certain programs, what would those be? Is it raising revenue? How would you like to see revenue raised in order to fund these changes?
Yeah, so money for coastal resiliency is already there, and is making sure that we actually put that money to use, but making sure that we have community input. Some of my policies on our white paper, which is the first of many focused on climate change, focuses on waste and what we can do locally to address that. I'm committed to making sure that LES ecology stays in our district and expanding a pilot program to include summer youth jobs and having our youth kind of collect compost from buildings all throughout our district to make sure it gets to LES ecology. And I feel like it's a double win. We're not only saving the planet, but we're offering jobs to people who need it. We're not changing the policy. We're not changing how things are refunded or not. The money is there. Is the will and the political capital to make this happen locally. And I plan to do that.
Thanks. Another question from Melissa Schiffman. Melissa?
Hey, Chris, how are you? I'm going to bring it back to education. I heard what you said about free Wi-Fi for students. And as someone who's been on school PTAs for about a million years now, my son is at a Title I school, and access to Wi-Fi is a huge issue right now during COVID. And we're spending all of our PTA budget on desks for kids, headphone for kids, people who don't have access to these things to work at home. So I'm wondering how you will plan on providing access to Wi-Fi for all of them, because I've talked to city councils, this past few months about that, and still waiting.
Yeah, we definitely need to have a budget that addresses that. We're the only big city that I can think of that doesn't have free Wi-Fi for everyone. When you go to London, when you go to Hong Kong, there's always a public Wi-Fi system for everyone to use, and New York City doesn't have that in place. So it's whether using our Link NYC as routers to make sure that kids who live in Section 8 in NYCHA or live with low-income family and tenements have access to that. If we can't get it from the citywide budget, I would use my discretionary funds to start implementing it in areas that are most vulnerable, whether that's in Rutgers housing, in LaGuardia housing, making sure that they have a place, whether it's a community room, to have free Wi-Fi. Having technology is a huge issue. When I used to be a volunteer basketball coach at MS 131, the students there didn't even have a computer room. And it was through advocating and making sure that elected officials knew that they were failing our students, that they finally got iPads. So I feel like if you advocate, you have the will, and it's something we need to do. And so it has to be done.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. That's the end of our 20 minutes. But thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you for everyone. Your club has been amazing since you started, and I look forward to working with everyone here.
Again, Chris, there might be some other questions in the chat. If you've got time to stick around and scroll through that would be great. But otherwise, we're going to move on to our fifth and final candidate this afternoon. That's Maud Moran. Maud, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
I am here and I'm unmuted.
Great, there you go. Maud, you got 4 minutes to introduce yourself and then we'll hop into questions.
Absolutely. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Some of you have heard this before, so it'll be a little bit repetitive, but I'm going to try to keep this introduction part brief so that we can get to some questions. So first of all, I'm happy to be here at Grand Street Democrats and to be speaking to you about why I'd like to be the next city council person for District 1. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of 4 kids. I have 3 sons and a daughter. My kids are 14, 12, 10, and 4 years old. So Gigi Lee, who's at the start of her journey, has quite a ride in front of her because being a parent is definitely life-changing. All my kids are in public school. They're in public school and they all have different blended schedules at the moment. So that's been quite a challenge. My husband, Juan Pablo, is an immigrant to this country. He's from Argentina and we have been together now for 2 decades and are raising our family together. outside of my family, I'm a public defender. I've worked for the largest public defender agency in the city for my entire career. And that work informs all of my concerns about criminal justice reform, which has taken some great steps forward recently, but there's still a lot of work to be done. My work as a public defender certainly informs my opposition to the borough-based jails, but particularly to the one in Manhattan. I don't think it's the right way. It's not even close to the right way to solve some of the issues with our incarceration system and the cost that it imposes, the enormous costs, not just the money, but the costs to our community are really staggering. Prior to, right, I went to Barnard College, and after graduation, I went to work for the Parks Department, and I worked at Randall's Island, and there was a newly formed public partnership there. And I mention this because I do think that when a public partnership is well structured and well run, it offers a lot of benefits to maximize public resources. And given the COVID created budget crises that our city is going to be facing for the next few years, being innovative and smart about how to spend the more limited funds that we will have and how to maximize public resources and public services to everyone is really rather crucial. In addition to my career and that work that I've done, I have also been, I've been on my community board for many years where I learned a great deal, but ultimately I found my most effective advocacy space was around education. I've been on the Community Education Council District 2 on my second term now. I have served as the president, as the vice president, as a member of that council. I founded and chaired a multilingual committee and worked with the community to establish a dual language program there in our district rather. I've also worked on something called the New York State Integration Team. And I mention it because we've had an enormous success in that we, the team put together a grant proposal to integrate the schools in our district that was submitted to NYSED, the New York State Education Department. And ultimately that proposal that we put forth, and this was a competitive grant process, several districts throughout New York State applied for this. That proposal was successful and our district was awarded $2.6 million. And it's incredibly important because we have a lot of work to do to address inequities in our school, both the issues of integration itself, but also the inequities of the actual quality of the education that's being delivered to children. So, so that was a great success and really a lot of effort to work with so many different perspectives and voices to submit a plan that was ultimately successful. Right now, I would say I think our communities are at a bit of a crossroads. COVID has certainly hit so many communities very hard. And what we need to have is elected officials who will listen to us. And I'll give you a really quick example. Yesterday, I was at a rally with my youngest son, my 4-year-old, with a lot of other parents demanding that we keep our schools open right now, right? Because over the summer, the city came up with this plan of closing at a 3% transmission rate, but we know so much more now than we did. And we have a lot of data and a lot of information about schools not being super spreaders of this virus. And what we really need are elected officials who listen to the communities and talk about, who are responsive to our communities to understand how important it is to keep schools open. And obviously to have a robust remote program for folks who need that as well. I think to answer a few, since I've had the ability to listen to some of your questions, I will say along those lines that I don't think this is the right time to be spending the kind of money that's been allocated for projects that maybe we need to take a better look at. The resiliency plan has really has not convinced a lot of members of the community that it's the right plan. And I think this is a time to maybe revisit those concerns with the community. Certainly the jail is one that we shouldn't be spending that kind of money on. And there are several things that I think we need to revisit from this past administration, from the Bill de Blasio administration as we move forward, because we're in a new world, a new budget world and a new world in terms of how we are going to climb out of this pandemic with strong, vibrant communities, with supporting our local stores, with supporting our all the folks that we need to have strong, vibrant businesses in order to make our neighborhoods safe and make them livable and make them the amazing neighborhoods that they are. So I am committed to standing up and fighting for all of us. And I appreciate everyone who's here tonight and who's listening. And I look forward to hearing your questions.
Great, thanks, Maud. I'm going to ask one quick question first, just to clarify about your resume, because I think there's been a change since the last time we saw you. Are you still the president of CEC1?
I've never been the president.
Two, I'm sorry.
Of
Two.
No, I'm not. I am a member of the Community Education Council District 2.
Okay, great, thanks. Deborah Mills, are you still there? Do you want to ask the first question? I can't tell if she is or not. Let me move on to Bill Ferns. And Deborah, if you come back in, you're welcome to ask your question.
Hi, thanks for coming today. So my question is similar to what I've been asking other people, the other candidates. What is your stand on using the AMI for affordable housing, or how it is as a metric, and also about the loophole of putting building no limits on zoning? And what I'd like to see is height limits on buildings and zoning, so that we could have reasonable development and not crazy super tall development. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, great. Hi, Bill. No, I think those are great questions. I think on the AMI, forgive me, I don't remember who said it, but I do think there's some funny math coming from developers sometime, because we need to, we have a tremendous, in our lower Manhattan neighborhoods, we have a tremendous spread of socioeconomic, rates of different communities. And so we have to really, the reason you build affordable housing is not for the people at the upper income levels. You build affordable housing for the people who need those subsidies and who need to be able to stay in a community. So our AMI, we should really be able to look at the folks who need the subsidies and not, I gotta quiet my kids down for 1 minute. Hold on one quick sec. Well,
thank you.
I think,
sorry.
sorry for that, but what, yeah, that's everyday life now with remote, and actually they've been totally quiet the whole time I've been on this call. It's just when I start speaking that they decide to come out. So yes, I do think we have a problem with the AMI. We have to make sure that affordable housing is affordable for the actual people who need it the most. And Bill, what was the second part of what you asked me?
Right now, there are no height limits in zoning.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's what allows the super talls to happen, because
Right.
the developers exploit the loopholes.
I think it's very hard to find areas where so many members of a community agree, but I think this is one of them. Our communities do not want mega tall towers, and I think we should certainly be able to impose height limits and work with developers to build. We can build. I live in Soho. There's been as of right building going on in my neighborhood since I've lived here for almost a decade now. We can do building, and we can certainly expand the amount of affordable housing, make it truly affordable in the places where we have building going on, but there's no reason to have the super mega towers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ian Rosenberg, you're up next.
Hi, thanks. Maud, I'm a white public school parent, but I do believe strongly in diversity education and anti-racism education. And I was really troubled by your New York Post editorial or op-ed where you said the administration and many local politicians buy into a benign sounding but chilling doctrine called anti-racism, which insists on defining everyone by race, invites discrimination, and divides all thought and behavior along a racial axis. I'd like you to explain why you felt like writing an op-ed in the Post was going to be a productive means of building bridges with people of color and other communities in the public school system.
Sure. So I'm super happy you asked about it, because I think it's so important for us to have really honest conversations about how to improve our schools, right? We need to really talk about the hard issues and accept the fact that not everyone's going to agree with us, right? Like, you may not agree with all my positions and I may not agree with all of yours, but I bet we both agree that we need to have incredibly strong public school systems for all the kids who are in them, but particularly for the most vulnerable kids, right? Particularly for the kids who don't have the sort of support and resources at home to fill in the blanks when schools aren't doing a good enough job. And for me, I think it's very, very clear that the Bill de Blasio, Richard Carranza talking show, because they do a lot of talk, but they haven't actually proposed any plans to integrate our schools or to improve the level of academic instruction, that's not good enough. And it's not good enough for what any of our kids need, but particularly the most vulnerable kids among us. I think you can have a difference of opinion about whether particular, whether it's an anti-bias training or whether it's a race-based theory of how to understand discrimination. You can have a different opinion about whether it's effective, whether it's smart, whether it's appropriate, but still work together on shared goals. And I'm quite sure that all of us on this call have some very real shared goals that we should be able to work towards together.
Okay, thanks. Keen Berger. Keen, you're up next.
Thanks. So thanks, Maud. And what about locally in terms of Grand Street Dems? The same question I asked Chris, what is your local plan for us down here?
Okay, well, hi, Keen. I've known you because I showed up for many, many years at our Community Board 2 meetings.
Yes.
And I will say that there are a lot of, Lower Manhattan's a very diverse neighborhood, right? So I certainly wouldn't promise to be at every single board meeting and every single community meeting and every single local Democratic club, because I don't know how to clone myself and split myself. But I think it's incredibly important to show up. And I think it's really important to try to check in with local communities, because in my experience, when you show up and you talk to people, you learn. And you learn what's important to people, you learn where you have common ground, and you are either, what you believe gets reinforced because you find out other people agree with you, or you learn new information from talking to your neighbors and talking to your community. So of course, I would be very happy to be invited back to the Grand Street Democrats and to continue these conversations. But, we have to, there's only so many hours in the day. So I think we have to do the best we can to be in as many places as we can at once.
I do the same thing all the time, as you know.
Okay, thanks. I want to thank, I'm not sure who mentioned that there are a couple of students in the meeting room, and I want to call on Zoe Markman. Zoe, do you have a question?
Hi, yeah, my question is, so you're on the executive board of Place NYC, an organization that endorsed the Trump Republican for a congressional race in Staten Island, which Max Rose eventually lost. So will you apologize for your role in electing a Trump Republican in a crucial swing district?
So I Place NYC, and I invite everybody, so Zoe, thanks for the question, but I invite everybody to check out the website. Place NYC has a great deal of information about the education advocacy that we do. And I will say that, I'll give it a short plug. We have an event coming up on November 19th. Sorry for that noise. On November 19th about ability grouping, which is, a really relevant topic to our education conversations, because it really goes to the heart of some of the problems that we are having in figuring out a way to have the kind of successful schools that are in too short supply in our school system, and to have fully integrated schools. And so we have a really thoughtful presentation coming up on that. I am not actually on the committee that does the endorsements from that group, but I will say this, in general, I do think that we need to accept the fact that not everyone's going to agree with us on everything. And I work with people who feel very differently on education, and we've built a coalition of parents who are able to focus on the shared goals that we have and not constantly sort of try to divide up along all of the differences of opinions, of which there are many. People have different opinions about how to achieve the many reforms that we need to within our education system.
Thanks. I've got another student on the board here, William Dieppe. William?
Thank you. So this was shown in the chat, but you wrote an op-ed published to the New York Post saying that anti-racist bias training is unnecessary, and they do, quote, nothing to actually improve our broken schools, end quote. You also have made it clear that you support the use of education mission screens, including the SHSAT, which continue to screen out Black and Latinx students from the top-ranked schools in New York City. Finally, you banned the chat from all future CEC District 2 meetings because one student wrote in the chat, ACAB. Does that mean you support the continued oppression of our Black and Latinx students?
Well, thank you, William, and it's nice to see you again. You've been a frequent person who has come to Community Education Council meetings, and I commend you for speaking up so much. Just one note of correction. I did not ban the chat. In fact, I encouraged us to keep open a chat for several months when several of the other members of my council wanted to shut it down. But I actually believe in robust conversation, even if folks don't agree about everything all the time. So I said we should keep open a chat, but as Jeremy said at the beginning of this meeting, I think it's really reasonable to expect people to be polite and respectful and appropriate in an online chat. When a group of folks became so rude and unhappy, it was agreed by my entire council, some of whom had been advocating earlier to shut down that chat, to shut it down. So that it wasn't something that I shut down, it was something that I actually fought to keep open, because I think we should be able to have conversations with one another. And I will say this again, I do not think that fixating on racial differences is solving some of our education problems, which are so crucial to solve. Racism is real and exists, and we need to address it. And I have talked about how to address systemic racism, both in our criminal justice system and in our education system. But in and of itself, talking about it, acknowledging it, and thinking about it doesn't fix our schools. It doesn't educate kids better. It doesn't teach children how to read in a city where over 50% of our school students don't read or do math on a grade level. So we need to be able to move beyond that conversation and talk about the educational solutions that we need. And I am not convinced at all that getting rid of educational programs that have been successful for a long time will somehow address these enormous deficiencies that most impact Brown and Black students, particularly Black boys, who are really the ones who are getting the least well served by our education system right now. And I think that's a crisis that we need to talk about and deal with and address.
Okay, great, thanks. We've got time for one more question, and Jan Lee, I'm gonna give you the honors.
Thank you so much. And hello, Maud, and thank you for this opportunity. Maud, you right out of the gate started talking about how the money for the borough-based jails is perhaps not appropriate. And thank you to Tiffany Winbush and also to Chris Marte for taking a position and not sidestepping this issue. It's very important to us. If you had the ability to, as a council member, work on how that money could be better spent so that people will not have contact with the criminal justice system in this never-ending cycle. What would you do if we were not building jails and taking some control of that money? From your experience as a person who's an educator and also someone in the legal profession, what would you do with that money?
Great. So I think, thank you, Jan, for the question. I really appreciate it. Look, in addition to that money, that staggering sum of money that was slated to be spent on jails, we can see in this past administration some really eye-popping figures that have not been spent well, right? The de Blasio administration spent $730 million, just over $730 million on a school program called the Renewal Program, which they closed down after about 6 years because it wasn't producing the results that they were aiming for. The Thrive program that's been run by the mayor's wife is now over $1 billion. And I don't think anyone in city government expects that program to last beyond the de Blasio administration because it has not been successful by almost any metric you can imagine in terms of delivering the very crucial mental health programs that we need. And Jan, I'm very glad you asked about what we can do to fix things if we're not building that jail, because the truth is, Rikers Island, which is a place I have been many times as part of my profession, is just a horror show. There are so many things wrong with the way we do pretrial incarceration and the way we incarcerate people from the very young to the very old when they're serving city sentences. So one of the things that I think is most important to do is stop trying to reinvent the wheels by every new administration coming in and designing a new program because they're trying to brand their program with our taxpayer dollars. I think we have to look at the fact that there are several really successful programs that exist and look at the ones that are already successful, sometimes that are really small CBOs and really small non-governmental agencies that are doing really good work, and find ways to expand those. For criminal justice issues, we have to find ways to expand our programs that are delivering for clients who have mental health issues and often wind up in the criminal justice system because of drug abuse or because of mental health issues, or both, or the combination. And with regard to our students, because we have so many students who are falling through the cracks of our education system, there are a lot of really successful schools that are operating on a small scale to deliver to the student populations that are least well served by our overall public school system. And I think what you do is look at the models that work well. Here in Soho, we have a program called The Door that's a few blocks away from where I live that does a really good job of educating really at-risk youth. You look at the programs that are successful and you replicate. Oops, that is my buzzer. So I'll finish up. You look at the programs that are successful and you replicate those, because they have a proven track record for what works.
Okay, thank you for setting your own timer there. That saves me the trouble. Maud, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We are going to.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. So for everybody else, we're going to just take a couple of minutes to ask anybody who's not a member of the club to leave. We're going to help you out with that if you're lingering. And probably in about 5 minutes, then we're going to start our members only discussion so that we can get to voting on our club endorsement. Before we do that, though, I just want to thank everybody. That was a marathon session, 2 hours. We got through a lot of questions and answers, and I really appreciate everybody's questions and time and patience. We're only 10 minutes over, and I'll try to do better next time, but it's not terrible. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much. Members, please stay in. If you're not a member of the club, please have a good night.